Yeah, they're right. I don't mind. I was interested. But for that, I don't like it. I don't. I like it. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, okay, go
All right, welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a nice lunch. While we were on lunch, were there any burning questions or anything that has come up for you before we dive into probably the biggest of the modules of the day right after lunch? Any questions? So far, so good?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So personality disorders is the largest of our modules because again, there are so many. And they're pretty complex, but hopefully we can try to keep it pretty light and fluffy in terms of getting through the content. It's probably one of my favorite topics because it is just so interesting. How many people here have worked with somebody who lived with a personality disorder, diagnosed or suspected? Some people maybe, you think possibly. In terms of personality disorders, they are very often not diagnosed. The diagnostic criteria for personality disorders is particularly challenging, and we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. Also recognizing that sometimes this really doesn't even matter if you have the diagnosis or not, and we'll talk about why that's the case as well. And we'll get into an understanding of what is personality disorder and how does a personality disorder kind of become disorder. And I feel that in order for us to really understand what a disordered personality is, we really have to understand what is personality in general. So even with this slide, which I guess gives away a little bit, but not so much. What do you think is personality is? What is a personality? Yeah, so how you kind of your you basically, you're you in an environment, right? Like so your uniqueness and it's your the way you portray yourself, your all of your goods and your bads rolled into one in some sort of way. Anything else? What makes up someone's personality? Thinking, feeling, and behaving, absolutely. But what determines the way we think, feel, and behave? Our environment, culture, yeah. Where you were raised, yeah, absolutely, of course. So basically, our personality is a combination of a bunch of different things that we picked and kind of chosen. Sometimes not so much like really chosen; it's just kind of great. But it's a combination of a bunch of different things that kind of coexist together to create a uniqueness of something, right? And it's based around a bunch of different experiences in our life that gauge how we've either built resiliency or maybe avoidance or maybe other things based on what we've come into contact with throughout our lives. So, for example, you can even say somebody has a fear of dogs. Well, why did that fear develop? It could be based on an experience. And then based on that, how we think, feel, and behave about dogs is going to be part of our personality. Does that make sense? So it's like a combination of a bunch of different things that can be kind of based on what we A, were born with, B, what we've developed through our experience, and also through just the environment and what we've kind of taken from that, but also through what what's been passed on to us, right? So what's personality is way of thinking, feeling, and behaving, and that is based on or inspired through a bunch of different processes throughout our life. When is it considered that a personality is developed? Or when do we start developing our personality? Two months? Yeah, some would even say you grow, right? And how do you really know that? But biologically speaking, if you're starting to have that makeup and you're starting to engage with the or whatever, sure, we can potentially start building our personality in that. And when do we stop building our personality? You don't have to yell at me. Yeah, pretty much. We can go through different changes in our personality, but a lot of people would say that our the most development of our personality is done between the ages of 18 to 21. So when we distinguish like that our personality is kind of grown enough to be considered matured is in that time frame. Not that we ever really stop developing our personality and changing and evolving, right? But prior to the age of about 21, and some people will argue, depending on what study you read, 18 is usually the cutoff, which is why people consider adulthood around 18, is when our brains are fully developed and we can actually be considered like matured in terms of our brains. So this actually becomes quite important when we consider why personality and how that relates to personality disorders, this idea of having the most insured in terms of their personality. Because you have to consider, well, then what is a personality disorder? Which is a way of thinking, feeling, and behaving that deviates from the expectation of culture. So there was an actual, I honestly, at this point, I cannot remember where I read it, so I apologize. I'm going to say that it was a real story because I'm pretty positive it was from some sort of study that I read. But basically, there was a situation where somebody was often seen dancing in the street. And people thought that that was a deviation from the culture, but turns out from their culture, this was something they did to celebrate at that time. And it wasn't actually a mental illness. This was somebody celebrating. So again, we have to look at what is the culture, not necessarily just our culture, but their culture as well. And especially considering in Toronto, we are the most multicultural city in the world. This also extends for us to understand that we need to do our due diligence before going, well, that person obviously has a mental health disorder. Right? We need to obviously look at what that means to that person and what they could possibly be. So the big things here are that it can cause trouble in most life situations. Personality characteristics are very rigid and difficult to change, and it impacts their emotions, impulse control, judgment, and cognition. And one of the highlights of every single personality disorder is coping ability and interpersonal relationships. And what do I mean by interpersonal relationships? It just means relationship with people. Anyway, any sort of relationship. Okay. And I need for you to hold on to that as we go through the rest of this module. That is, those are very coping strategies, and interpersonal relationships are big things here. So a personality disorder is a type of mental disorder in which one has a rigid and unhealthy pattern of thinking, functioning, and behaving. A person with a personality disorder has trouble perceiving and relating to situations and people. This causes significant problems and limitations in relationships, social activities, work, and school, and can lead to social isolation or alcohol or drug use. In most cases, the people do not realize they have a personality disorder because to them, their way of thinking and behaving seems natural. This is also another huge thing to take about personality disorders. They lack insight. They don't know what they're doing is disordered. Now, if we consider people who can appreciate that they have a depressive disorder, people who can appreciate that they live with anxiety, people who are living with personality disorders don't have that appreciation. Their protective or coping skill is often to deflect and utilize other people's coping skills. So we'll talk a bit about that. And I want to, again, preface by saying, when I explain personality disorders, I want you to remember this idea of a spectrum. I'm going to be displaying, we're talking about very extreme behaviors in each of the personality disorders. Please recognize that not every person who has the personality disorder is going to act in that exact way. There is a spectrum of behaviors, okay? A lot of people may go through their whole lives without even realize, or anybody else realize that they have personality disorder. It could be that minor, but we have to recognize again that there are extremes. Okay? So the lack of insight becomes a very, very big piece in terms of not understanding that what they're doing is disorder. They don't know that what they're doing is causing the problem. Okay? So they tend to blame other people for their challenges. They often can't hold the mirror for the face. And the reason why is because they lack the coping ability to do so. So remember, big major issue is coping and relationships. So the coping is actually where the maladaptive personality behavior comes from, is the inability to cope with stress. So we're going to talk about what that looks like in terms of what the coping strategies are that actually determine what the personality disorder is. It's how they cope that differentiates them in the different categories. So there are many types of personality disorders. There's 10 of them actually, to be over 3 clusters. And personality disorders can significantly disrupt the lives of both the person and the family, as well as caregivers. And they can significantly deplete staff's energy to when they're trying to meet the needs of people living with personality disorders. So there are 4 other defining features we talked about this already. So distorted thinking patterns is one of the common behavioral attributes of personality disorder. We'll get more into detail. Problematic emotional responses. This is usually with emotional regulation, trying to regulate their emotions. That so often people will say that their their emotions are not suitable to the situation, whether that is under emotional or overly emotional. So that's the dysregulation. There's also the impulse control. So beyond just the emotions they're feeling, it's the actions that come with that based on impulse. And then the interpersonal difficulties and the relationships that are affected by it. So when we consider the diagnostic criteria for people living with personality disorder, I'm not going to go into all of these different things, but if you look at what this says here, usually the person has to have at least 2 areas of problems from these 4 defining features. And here's where the tricky part comes, is because it has to have been present since the age of, before the age of, or sorry, it has to have been, so it has to be stable and of long duration, and its onset can be tracked back to at least adolescence or early adulthood. So you would have to be able to track their behavior patterns all the way back to 18. And people cannot be diagnosed with a personality disorder until they reach 18. Because again, their personality is not mature or isn't developed enough to actually diagnose them prior to that. So if we consider people who we support in geriatrics who have never been diagnosed with personality disorder, are any of you going to be able to prove their behavior all the way back to 18 years old? My answer is no. So you can put things like query personality disorder, you can say suspected personality disorder, you can say show signs of and related to behavior, blah, 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 blah. But to get an actual diagnosis from the DSM, you have to cover this criteria, and you can't in majority of cases. You really cannot. So when we consider this, that can seem like a really big barrier, right? Oh my God. I can't get diagnosis. Well, here's the good news and the bad. You don't need it. And we'll explain why in a couple slides. But first things first, just recognizing that that is basically the criteria is you have to prove these strict and rigid patterns of behavior all the way back to adulthood or at least adolescence or early adulthood. And that these have shown distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. The other thing is that people will say, well, we can talk to them, to the patient, client, resident. But why would that pose a problem? Asking them about their experience with personality disorder. They don't think they have. So they can't really be an accurate historian for themselves if they don't even believe or have the insight into their problem. And the other part is that's really, really tough is that because they have so many issues with relationships, that by the time they're getting to us in their geriatrics, you don't have a lot of people around them. A lot of the time you'll hear things like, oh no, the kids don't talk to them, or if they even had kids, or they're divorced, or their wife wants nothing to do with them, or their wife was named POA and they didn't want it. But there's a lot of situations in which you'll see these strange relationships that have somehow followed along throughout their lives. You'll also hear things like, oh, my mom's always been this way. right? So you'll hear things like that. That might give us, again, some clues to the fact that this might be a personality disorder. But it's really hard to definitively prove or provide proof to meet the DSM criteria. So what is the cause of personality disorders? Well, no one really knows. It's, again, this combination of different things that people are faced with based on experiences. And if you think about how our personality starts developing when we're in the womb, we start to also develop coping strategies with me. And what is a coping strategy? Yeah.
How you handle a stressor, how you handle anything.
Absolutely. So when you're faced with some sort of stressor, no matter how big or small, you learn strategies to overcome that stress and get yourself back to a like a homeostasis, if you say, like a balance, a baseline, right? So if something triggers us, we go, maybe that's your strategy to bring us back down to baseline. Maybe your strategy is to run in the bedroom and cry. I don't know. Maybe it's to have a glass of wine. Very often that is a coping strategy for people. Maybe it's to go for a run. Maybe it's to have a nice hot bath. Maybe it's to do whatever. There are positive and negative coping strategies, all of which serve a purpose, and all of which can be, again, good or bad, depending on the person. Or some of them can be for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. You know what I mean? So coping strategies can help you get through a certain thing. But the whole point of coping strategies is to try to get you back to a baseline. Now, if you have the ability to cope and get yourself back to a baseline, then that is considered a coping strategy that's working for you. The problem with disordered personalities is that the coping strategy is actually what's causing the maladaptive behavior. So we'll get into that a little bit. So risk factors for the development of personality disorders include like adverse life events, right? So trauma, learned defense mechanisms, biological factors, if there's adverse childhood experiences or events. So one would say that when we consider a maladaptive coping strategy, usually that can be, or at times, and there's people who believe, because remember, none of this is fact. These are all just kind of theories that people believe, because we don't know exactly what causes it. But some of the belief is that when trauma is not processed or resolved appropriately, that the traumatized brain is impacted by trauma to the point where brain development is hindered and has a neurobiological consequence, like dysregulation of the stress hormone cortisol. So that is a biological consequence, they're saying, of having trauma, which can actually hinder brain development, which they believe could lead to the maladaptive stress. There's also this idea that certain adverse events create a almost like an association with strategies. So like, you know how they say that if a child sees domestic abuse, they're more likely to abuse, right? Because if you consider what abuse is, it's actually a strategy to deal with stress. It's an awful one, but if someone feels angry or has to deal with a stressor, they choose to use violence. That is a coping strategy, a bad one, like I said, but that's what it is. So if you are exposed to poor coping strategies, even you may not take it in as a poor coping strategy because that's what you know. So you might actually utilize similar coping strategies unless somehow down the line it's not different. If you only know what you're exposed to, right? So we have to look at that as a possibility. We also have to think about how trauma also influences other mental health outcomes, like suicide risk, substance use, other kind of behaviors like sexual promiscuity, which are all features of certain personality disorders. And some of those early, could be things like disordered attachment, right? Bullying, looking at exposure to long-term fear or neglect, being in part of war, sexual abuse, physical abuse, having any sort of major trauma event that happens, whether it's an accident or whether like all of these things can potentially cause trauma. And if people are using maladaptive coping skills to cope with that trauma, they are continuously being exposed to that coping strategy, therefore reinforcing. Does that make sense? I know it's a lot going on here, but does that make sense so far? Okay, I know it's a lot. So another way to think about this in terms of coping strategies are defense mechanisms, right? So if you think about coping, you're also trying to protect yourself. So you use strategies that actually protect you psychologically and physically. And those coping strategies to try to get yourself to a baseline can be used through defense mechanisms. So defense mechanisms can be coping strategies. So, is that helping? Okay. So when we consider the different defense mechanisms, they're a way of preventing the person from dealing with the situation firsthand and taking responsibility for what's happening. So they're basically trying to, again, almost separate themselves from the problem and almost making it external to them. So there are a few ways in which people could do that. That like these are just like a couple of them, and there's a whole bunch that you could read about, but the ones that we mostly know about are things like denial, so just denying it right out. Denial, right? There's splitting, which is probably one of the biggest ones that we recognize in long-term care, because it's basically where the person will split staff and utilize to pit staff against each other, so that the problem is no longer them, it's you. And they do this by choosing sides and then switching really quickly. So they might say, oh, it's a day shift. Oh, well, evening shift lets me do this. And I heard evening shift said that you don't do this very well. Right? Team split. So basically the day shift is now pissed off at the evening shift because that's what she wanted. And now the day shift is more likely to give her something because the day shift now wants to also get on the good side because the evening shift does, so she thinks she's getting away with something. And that is a huge behavioral split. So that's why often people will, when we come in for like case consultation for personality disorder, we often say we all have to be on the same team, and we have to recognize that the person with personality disorder is going to try to find the weakest link to turn, because that's their strategy. They want the control.
We're splitting the saying this person's all good, this person's all bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they can easily swap.
Yeah. Right.
So it's like, and then the person who was on the good side becomes taken aback because now they're the bad guy.
Yeah.
And that it just creates a confusion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See this also a lot in family dynamics. Why we constantly pick one person as a point of contact because we're happening. They try to fragment team members and go to them for the same thing and get different answers, and then they will try to pull that again.
100%. And yeah, thank you for mentioning that too, because it's often what we, see when we find those families very challenging. Yeah.
That could be a part of their personal disorder where, well, that also could be different than.
No, that's okay, because I wanted to tease this out a little bit. Are we talking about the splitting of personalities like dissociative identity disorder?
Yeah.
Like where we have more than one personality? So that's a different type, but that is a trauma response. It's related to this idea of creating a whole other identity to protect the other one, to disassociate. So if you look here, there's also projection. Another one is disassociation, where they actually disassociate the person who experienced the trauma. They weren't strong enough to handle it, so they completely split from that person and created a strong identity to protect that one. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
And some people question whether it's real. There's a lot of like
Yeah, right.
so much joy that I think is absolutely possible. The brain is so, if you can convince your body that it's pregnant when it's not,
Girl, the certain things.
oh, I haven't even seen that yet, but I know about the case. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
All right, yeah.
Which one did you say?
Okay.
Which one did Tamara say?
No, she's saying that we're talking about this. Yeah, I thought you were gonna talk about it.
I'm not gonna say anything, I just finished it and it is.
I don't hear anything else, that's enough, thank you. Because I know one statement with me, I can then tell the whole.
Yeah.
The whole story, probably, of that is the whole thing.
But the other place that I think people are able to even convince themselves of things that are, that actually are real that aren't. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Any Grey's Anatomy thing? Remember the girl that had the hysterical pregnancy?
Yep.
Well, that was in the ferry boat accident and then she's like, I'm pregnant and then it was very nice. Yeah, she had the whole thing.
Someone I was like that, too, actually, father.
I had a client who had repressed memory, and she had dissociated so effectively from the sexual abuse that she had experienced as a child, and she only remembered it as an adult when she went back to the place where it happened, and it just so happened that she went there, and it was, I mean, she had completely repressed. Completely, it did not happen.
It's not happening.
It did not happen, and then that realization that this completely changed her entire identity because she never identified it as a childhood experience.
Yeah.
And now as an adult, she's processing.
Trying to process this
This
new reality
where
that just happened.
completely dissociated so effectively that it truly never happened.
Like it's amnesia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there is a lot to say about trauma and amnesia, right? So like a lot of people have an experience of trauma and can't remember if anybody's watched the documentary Crash.
Mhm. Yeah.
So again, whether that's true or not,
Well, I'm gonna say these court cases, that's what I start following, and it's when they deal with this type of thing.
it's hard. How do you know? How do you know if someone's actively telling the truth unless you kind of actually live the lie, right? So I mean, this idea of whether it's there's so much about the world we don't know.
Yeah.
And I think about the brain as the equivalent of deep sea and deep space. Like we have only touched on this.
Yeah.
Surface,
Yeah.
right? And I would love to be alive in 5,000 years, part of me. Really doesn't want to be, and I don't know if there'll be a universe, but I would love to see where we get at that point. Is what I'm trying to say. Because of how much advancement, even with the year 2026, how far we've gotten in terms of certain things, and how far we've grown some wildness.
Like, sure they've done on that case craft as well too. Like you need to study the brain, there's certain waves that make it signal, like, she lied, she was like in the creative part of her brain. It's, if anybody wants to watch it, I will ruin it, saying. You
Yeah.
seen it or you want it?
I found my list, I have a whole bunch of stuff on my list, but I'm gonna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't give anything away. Anyway, it's an interesting thing.
Can you just talk first,
Yeah.
projection?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, projection is kind of exactly as it sounds. So it's almost like they're utilizing the defense mechanism is to project onto other people. So when I'm trying to give a good example. So if I'm upset with someone for I'm trying to think of something that's common. So let's just say I'm upset with you because you said something bad about me. And so I'm upset with you. And then in order for me to manage or deal with that, I'm then going to project it on someone or something that I feel safer with because I don't want to come to you. So I might go say I'm upset because my daughter didn't come see me today in long-term care. I might project that onto the staff and say that they didn't come to me fast enough. So it's the real cause of the stressor is something completely different, but they're projecting it on something they can control.
Right.
So again, the whole idea about the coping strategies is this idea of control. And when things are unpredictable, that creates more stress, which means they have further loss of control, and the more they'll do to gain it back to the detriment of everyone else.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's really basically like and I hate to use this term, and I hope this does come from an actual article. It is an older article, so I know the language isn't necessarily person-centered, but the way that they describe it, and the only way the reason I want to use this is because of the metaphor, but they relate personality disorders to emotional vampires. Because they actually physically drain energy from other people to cope with their own stress. So I hope you don't think that I'm actually calling people vampires or anything negative. It's literally the metaphor that they drain other people because they don't have the ability to cope.
Yeah.
So they have to kind of utilize the people around them to help cope. And they don't know what they're doing is wrong. They don't realize that what they're doing is actually affecting. So that's what a lot of these mechanisms are, defense mechanisms. Like they're trying to protect themselves because something really awful has probably happened to them, and they don't know they don't know how to manage it. They don't know how to cope. They didn't build up the right strategies to manage it. Where these are the strategies that were available to them. So we're going to use a case study to go through the different clusters. So we have a community one and a LTC one. So if you're in the next couple pages that you guys see, there's an LTC case study and there's a community case study. The behaviors are exactly the same. It's just the environment that's different. So if you're more comfortable reading about community, you can read community one. If you're more comfortable with the long-term care context, you can read it. But in the end, it's all the same. All right, so if you see at the bottom of either of those case studies that you read, so the behaviors of concern are the same. The refusing of medications. So I just want to kind of point out that the refusal of medications are when staff doesn't, or refusal of care is when staff won't give her what she wants. Right? or when they won't give in to her demand. Accuses staff of abusing her during care, frequently calls the family to complain, threatens to have the staff fired and questions their credentials. Multiple calls to the PSW manager or the DOC with complaints of abuse resulting in investigations, and feeling the attendant medical doctor is incompetent, and often requests book special visits. Does this sound like anybody that you have ever worked with? Yeah. Not just one, absolutely 100%. So we're going to utilize this as B as we go through the rest of the module. And I want for you to think about this B as we go through the different clusters and the different definitions of the personality disorders, and think, would this be living with this personality? And then just jot down what you think your final conclusions are. And we'll talk about that near the end of this module. But first, to talk about the different clusters. So there are 3 clusters of which there are 10 personality disorders. Cluster A and C have 3. Cluster 4 is the lucky winner with 4. Each of the clusters are defined by how people express or appear in terms of their behavior and appearance. Okay? It is not person-centered language. This is from the DSM. So when I say that somebody appears odd or eccentric, it's not me saying, oh, look at the odd person, because I would never use that word. But these are the words that are used in the DSM. So please take that with a grain of salt. So it is cluster A. People with these disorders often appear odd or eccentric. So we have paranoid personality disorder, schizoid personality disorder is schizotypal. We will go into them individually. This is just an overview. In cluster B, we are looking at those who often appear dramatic, emotional, or erratic. Again, not language I would use in my everyday life, but gets the point across. We are looking at antisocial personality disorder, borderline, histrionic, and narcissistic. Finally, cluster C, we are looking at those who appear anxious or fearful. So those are the avoidant, dependent, or obsessive compulsive personality disorders. So if you have cluster A, cluster B, cluster C, you can, in fact, have all 3 clusters at once. Isn't that fun? Or you can have multiple in a cluster. So recognizing that it's not a one-size-fits-all, but it is definitely you can try with one on. So looking at that as we move forward. So first we're going to look at the eccentric personality disorders. When we consider paranoid personality disorder, we are looking at obviously, what do you think is the highlight symptom of a paranoid personality disorder? Paranoid, right? People become quite paranoid about the people around them and what their motives are. They have a lot of mistrust, they're suspicious of others, they can be angry or have hostile reactions to perceived slights of insults. Again, remembering there's a spectrum, not everybody's going to act the exact same way. They may fear that others are trying to control them through the use of medication or drugs, and therefore may refuse or to take medications. They tend to hold grudges and become suspicious of people in their lives. So, for example, they might suspect their spouse or sexual partner is unfaithful to them. In terms of what you might see in our clients, you might see someone said, I will never take that up because I know you're trying to force me with it. Right? Now, if you consider somebody with dementia who refuses medications and say, no, I don't take your pills, and you have somebody with personality disorder, how do you know which one's which? How do you know if this behavior is dementia or if this behavior is possible personality disorder or is it personality disorder? Absolutely. So with dementia, you can usually use distraction. Sometimes they'll actually take the meds. Sometimes you can convince them. So it's not really based on their, it's more based on their memory and what they're relating to in that situation. And then there's one other defining feature. It's how long it behavior. Right? So if this has been happening for just, recently, that's not personality disorder. If there's a new behavior of something that mimics personality disorder, but the person is like in their 60s or even after their 30s, it's not personality disorder. It's probably an onset of something different. Remember, you can see the behavior all the way back to adolescence. If it's after that, the onset, not personality. Okay, schizoid personality disorder. We're looking at distant and detached. They may be introverts and restricted in their emotional expressions. They're usually asocial with a lack of interest in personal social relationships, and they prefer to be alone. The big thing about schizoid, is it's not that they don't like people, and it's not that they like people. They're completely indifferent. They don't care. It's not because they're like, well, no, people suck. I don't want to be around people. It's literally like, whatever. Like they don't have any sort of emotional attachment. Remember the emotional dysregulation, whether for work or on. This is like an unattachment to human beings in a relationship. Okay. They rarely express strong emotion. And an example is the person may decline to attend all activities and even meals in the dining room, just preferring to stay in their themselves. Schizotypal is an interesting one, and I've never seen it in real life. I've never seen somebody who's actually ever been diagnosed with schizotypal. Schizotypal, they tend to be extremely intelligent and extremely awkward. They usually dress in a way that's kind of more odd and eccentric. They tend to believe that certain casual incidents or events have hidden meaning just for them. So they believe that the radio is kind of talking to them, or the radio is sending them a message, which almost sounds like schizophrenia. But this is ongoing behavior that's not related to psychosis. Okay, they may display magical thinking, which is kind of in quotes here, believing they can influence people and events with their thoughts. So the only person that I can relate this to in any sort of context, and I know that I'm aging myself here though, is Kramer from Seinfeld. You know what I mean? Like really kind of quirky and like odd, but super like funny, but like just a weird, eccentric kind of person. Yeah. And it's like that's kind of what I see when I picture when I think this type. Yeah, or Sheldon Cooper even, yeah, like awkward, but like super smart, and also just like interesting human beings, right?
Kramer was that smart.
It's
Not that smart, like compared to Sheldon.
Sheldon's more like me.
So much of personality.
Or what's the
Which one?
oh, doctor, not to say.
Oh, Dr. House. Sorry,
He was normal too.
oh, right. He had autism.
Yeah.
He had autism. Okay. So any questions about cluster A? All right. Moving along to the ones that are probably a little bit more quote unquote popular, which is the cluster B personality disorders. Now, again, when I talked about how personality disorders, just like every other mental health or mental health concern, is on the spectrum, I really want to point that out for antisocial. Okay, because not everybody with an antisocial personality disorder is going to be a serial killer, but most serial killers have antisocial personality disorder. Fair? Antisocial personality disorder are sometimes called sociopaths or psychopaths, and they have a very disproportionate emotion towards that goes to the anger side of things. So I want to give you like kind of an example of how these things work. So if you consider that trauma could be the cause of somebody's personality disorder, let's just think about a case. So a baby, every time a baby cries, baby's hit. Baby starts to associate that when baby, because what is crying? Stress. So baby starts to associate that when baby's stressed, baby gets hit. So baby starts to learn that how you deal with stress is through violence. So when baby starts to get a little bit older and baby has their own autonomy in a way, baby starts to get stressed and cause violence. Which is why they say that in childhood, abuse of animals or other things are huge red flags for this. For sorry, you meant Nala. I'm a true crime junkie. Sorry. Well, many men and serial killers were animal persons, of course, but the idea stems from this idea that, or stems from the experience that you manage or deal with stressors through violence, because that's what they experience and that's what they know. And in some cases, that is sexual violence, or in some cases, it's just physical violence, or it's emotional violence, or whatever it might be, but it's always used as the way to manage. So if baby only ever knows this, what is baby going to emulate? Right? If they've never learned another way or built any other strategies, that's the only thing they have access to. So again, this is a antisocial personality disorder. Complete disregard for authority, because when your survival, because that's what coping is, we all use coping to survive, or our defense mechanisms to protect ourselves. If your survival is based on this, it's not going to matter if someone goes, you shouldn't do that, or you'll go to jail. You'll just learn to hide it, because that's how it's a survival mechanism. So they often have complete disregard for other people, because again, we're going to try to, above all, we are people who will defend ourselves to the death. Our whole brain and body is wired to survive. So if it comes down to it, we will fight. So people express have the inability to abide by society's rules. They often commit serious crimes. They have lack of remorse for their actions. They can be impulsive and are consistently irresponsible. They can often display violent behavior and express for the safety of self or others. And they have recurring problems with the law and repeated violation of the rights of others. Again, spectrum. Okay. So the next one that's probably the most popular in the media is borderline personality disorder. This is marked by the unstable moods, poor self-image, chaotic relationships, and impulsive behaviors. I don't know if anybody ever saw the movie Girl Interrupted. Fantastic movie with Angelina Jolie and Winona Ryder. It's a true story. It was written by a woman who had borderline personality disorder and spent some time in a mental health facility. It's a brilliant film if you haven't had an opportunity to see it. Ritter, then obviously read the book first. Always remember to go to them. In terms of borderline personality disorder, the issue is usually with managing and dealing with stressors as it comes. They often it's almost like, have you ever had it where you stub your toe and you're like, oh my God, and someone's like, oh, here, let me punch you in the arm, because then you won't think about your toe anymore. It's like that. So people with borderline personality disorder are like, oh my gosh, my boyfriend broke up with me. No, I'm gonna go get drunk and drive my car. Ah. Like it's almost like in order to deal with this problem, they have to create a bigger problem, so that they don't have to deal with that one anymore, because it's over and it's taken and it's bigger to deal with. Does that make sense? So they can't cope with this over here. So they choose something way more dramatic over here that causes even more of a big blow up and issue. And it's usually at the expense of someone else. So when I think about a lot of the borderline personality disorders and the dramatic personality disorders, I often relate it to driving home in the rain. So I want you to imagine that it's really like dark and the rain is splattering on your car and it's heavy, and the windshield, and you're trying just to see and you're driving in the right lane because you know you're driving a little slow, you don't want to get in the left lane, and there's a sidewalk there, and you see a pedestrian, and there's giant puddles, and you're just going, and you're just trying to see, and you just hit that puddle a mile and miles a minute, and that pedestrian on the street just goes, and they're like drowning in your puddle, but you don't even realize it because you're so concerned with getting home safe. You're so concerned being behind the wheel and getting there, just getting there, just getting there, just getting there. You don't even see the damage you're causing outside. This is literally what is going on in borderline personality disorder. They're so worried about getting home and getting to safe, getting to baseline. They're not realizing how much damage is going on outside the window. And they're splattering people, right? And the rain and everything else. And then people are like, you're an asshole. But the poor person with borderline personality disorder is literally just like, I'm just trying to, oh man, I feel so unsafe. I feel scared. And they're not realizing it. Does that make sense? So their literal ability to keep their like set themselves like together is often at the detriment. And they don't know how else to cope. And that also kind of falls into histrionic personality disorder as well. And histrionic personality disorder is the one that I have a really hard time with. And I'll go back to narcissistic stuff, it's pretty easy. But histrionic are those people apple cider vinegar.
Oh, yeah.
Apple cider vinegar lady. So there was a lady who had brain cancer. And started telling everybody that she had brain cancer and that she was using apple cider vinegar to cure it. But she actually didn't have brain cancer, but she got so addicted to the attention and so addicted to the likes that she couldn't stop lying because she couldn't live or cope without the attention.
Yeah.
And that is basically the histrionic personality disorder, is where people will lie and lie and lie and lie and lie to get the attention because they don't know how to cope without it. So even to the point of faking cancer, even to the point of, opening up GoFundMe's and getting a whole bunch of things for things that not true. We have the cases of like Gypsy Rose where the mom kept giving her, and that's a Munchausen syndrome, but it's also looking at the attention that the mom got from the fact that her daughter was sick. So she just kept keeping her daughter sick because she wanted the attention from other people. That is a histrionic personality. Where people will, to their own detriment and to the detriment of other people, keep the spotlight on themselves. It's also in like the innocent case of it is like when kids are the one-uppers, where it's like, oh my dad's a police officer. Oh yeah, well my dad's a alien spaceman. He goes in a rocket ship and he kills aliens. You're like, hey, chill. It's like that where the kids have to kind of run up themselves, but they never grow out. And this person will always continuously bring the attention back to them. But even in cases where like someone might be like, I was feeling all the weekend, I had an upset stomach. And their friend group might be like, oh, that sounds horrible, Sasha, like that must have been so hard. And then Brittany comes in and she's like, oh yeah, well I was bleeding out of my eyeballs and like I lost a leg and then they had to sew it back on and it was like, whoa, okay. Yeah, because the person cannot handle that the attention.
Right.
That's histrionic. Narcissistic. Sure, we all know someone in our brains that we can associate with this personality disorder. That's all I'm gonna say. It is exaggerated sense of superiority. The person believes that they are smarter, better, and deserve more than anybody else. They are actually hiding behind a very fragile self-esteem, and usually they lack empathy and also require constant attention and admiration in order to keep themselves. So often people with narcissistic personality disorder, they believe that they're special. They are preoccupied with power, prestige, and fantasize with success and attractiveness. They fail to recognize needs, feelings in other people, and they may also exaggerate their achievements or their talents, and often have an unreasonable expectation of favors and advantages, and often take advantage of people. This is often where people don't align themselves with other people in their environment. So for like example, if a resident knows there's a birthday party and say that there's 8 people at the birthday party and there's 8 cake, the narcissistic will say, I want 4 pieces of cake. And they'll say, but then not everybody else will have a piece. Okay, I want 4 pieces. It's almost like they have this belief that they are owed more for whatever reason. And the sense of coping, again, is close to this idea of histrionic. That if they don't maintain this prestige, then they'll lose the admiration and support. So it's what keeps them feelings like they can manage or cope is this idea of being adored and admired and being better than.
Is it in part like, you know, a lack of a stable identity?
It could be, yeah, depending on what the person experienced growing up. Like I try to relate like what could be like I often think about, you know, those kids that are kind of always told that they're great
Yeah,
at everything.
yeah,
They're never really taught
yeah,
to lose.
got it.
It's almost if that's the only thing you've ever known is that no matter what you do, you get praise, you get admiration. You're not going to be able to cope with when things go the other way. So you almost demand every door exam
Yeah,
because otherwise you can't cope. And when people go against that, it starts to again, you try to find ways to gain control. So if it's somebody who's in a like say if it's somebody who is in long-term care, but there's not a lot of control for them to gain, actually, they might start splitting because that's a way for them to have a bit of control. If it's somebody who's younger in, like, say, the workforce, they start to manipulate
yeah.
and they start to find ways to make it. So whether it's through really horrible means. And I'm sure a lot of us can think of a situation right now in which we've seen this happen in real time. How you kind of joke your way to the top
Yeah,
and believe.
yeah.
Yeah.
Happening with children.
Yeah.
Right?
Everybody gets a ribbon.
And there's no losing.
Yeah.
That is wrong.
I agree. I agree.
That's fine.
I agree.
Making children, you know, be that. It's just wrong. It's fine.
I agree. I think that there are certain things that we can do way better when it comes to developing people's ability to cope with loss. Like I was gonna say being a loser. but I need it, but I don't need it.
Yeah, so it's the same.
100%. If you think about it too, like like you know those Canadian Idol auditions or American Idol auditions, where the girl or boy walks in and he goes, "I'm the best singer you're ever gonna hear," because everybody tells me, and they go, "Oh," and everybody's like, "Oh my, you suck," and they're like, "Oh, "What do you mean? I know I'm good. I know I'm better than anybody who's ever seen you. Just are you hate really?" Again, it's nothing to do with that. People have never had to deal with the fact of being told to suck. And it's not a bad thing to be told to suck. Sometimes you need to be told because you do. You can't be good at everything. Nobody's perfect. And I like, sure, if it's something you love to do and you want to really put your energy into getting better, by all means, know that it might take a little extra work because you suck. But if it's something where you're like, I didn't really want to do that anyway, so don't waste any more energy on that. Find something that you love and do that you don't suck. Like, I think it's fair to tell people they suck. But again, I'm not the runner of the universe. Some people are very opposed to that. So those are cluster B. Cluster C, they're going to go through really quickly because they're pretty self-explanatory. Dependent personality disorder is people become very, very dependent. I'll give you the best example I have in terms of long-term care. A person keeps using the call bell. You keep coming in and they go, can you move my feet 3 inches to the left? So then you leave and then call bell and you go back and it's like, can you fill up my water? And you're like, it's already full. Some more, please.
Can you turn off the TV?
Can you turn off the heat?
You just turn it off.
Can you put the plant over like 1 degree? Right? They actually don't care about the tasks they're asking you. Why are they asking you to do all those little mundane stupid things? They want company. And they know you'll do it. Because it takes seconds. If they were to ask you, can you sit with me for 10 minutes? I'm feeling a little scared.
Right.
We'd say, I'll have to come back.
They don't want to be that vulnerable.
They don't want to be that vulnerable. Or we'll turn them down. We don't have 10 minutes sometimes. Or we say, you know what, I'll just be back. I have to go do this. But if they ask us to move our feet 2 degrees, we'll do it.
Right.
If they ask us to just fill the water up a bit, we'll do it. They don't give a crap with the plant being 3 degrees to the right. They know that if they ask you for something in 15 seconds, then they'll actually stay. That's not what we think about it. Right? That they're just trying to get as much time as they can because they're dependent. If they feel stressed, they're dependent on you to help them self-soothe. They aren't able to self-soothe. And that's one of the biggest things that we have as human beings is the ability to make ourselves go back to homeostasis on our own. That ability to kind of sit by ourselves and go, you know, it's a shit day. Okay, no, that's fine. Right? That's literally what we have. That's one up for us as humans. If you can't do that and you're constantly in this state of stress and you can't do that yourself, that's a really vulnerable place to be. So that's where it is in terms of a dependent personality disorder. They explain this past they've been very clean because they don't know how else to do it. They can't even make small decisions because they're so terrified of making the wrong decision. Avoidant personality disorder is the complete opposite of that. They don't want anyone. And it's usually because they're terrified of being judged. So it's not like schizoid. Remember schizoid, they're indifferent. Avoidant, they're scared. They're scared that people will judge them. They're afraid that people are going to embarrass them or that they'll be harshly ridiculed. So they don't want to be part of anything. They're too afraid and they can't manage that stress. So they just avoid it altogether. They don't want to shame at all. They can't cope with it. They can't cope with shame. And then the last one is OCPD. So everybody's probably heard of obsessive compulsive disorder. That is an anxiety disorder. People have insight that they have a compulsive anxiety. I have to turn the key 8 times, right? That's an anxiety disorder. Exactly. Yep, washing hands over and over, and it becomes extremely detrimental to their lives. It becomes so horrible for them, and they know it. In OCPD, they have no insight. They are lack awareness that they are that rigid in terms of perfectionism and inflexibility. They don't notice that they're actually perfectionists. And they become extremely hyper-focused and unable to move forward because they're too afraid that something won't be perfect. So they don't want to make decisions because they're like, well, what if it is perfect? So they almost stall themselves in making decisions. But they can also be, the fear often results in an inability to make decisions because they're so terrified that they're going to make the wrong one. That's not perfect. But then they have no insight into that's why they're afraid. They have difficulty with finishing tasks, the preoccupation with details. A person with OCPD may seek out help from a healthcare professional due to interpersonal problems, but not about their way of thinking or acting. So they might actually just, because they're having concerns with how people are getting along with them or interpersonal problems, but not about their perfection. They don't have that. All right, any questions about any of those personality disorders? So when we consider personality disorders in older adults, they often say, well, will it go away eventually? There are some studies that say that as somebody ages, like they will improve. With dementia, often those behaviors will subside a bit because again, it's due to the amnesia and whatnot. So they do have the dementia. But when you consider moving into a facility or the uncertainty of diagnosis or aging, that creates a lot of stress, which actually exacerbates behaviors. So when somebody first moves into long-term care, their behaviors are going off the rails because they have no control and it's so much stress. And that's just causing their behavior. Remember, the behavior is caused by the inability to regulate stress. So the more stress, the more the behaviors are going haywire because that's their way of trying to control it. So we can see, again, fluctuating in terms of whether the person has a older adult. The other thing is they may show symptoms of more than one personality disorder. They experience personality disorder-based fears of others and sometimes a mistrust of intimacy. And a loss of personal control can actually promote that conflict. Again, the stress. So the intensity of personality disorder features may decrease as people age, however, they continue to display the same characteristics and maladaptive coping strategies that they've always used, which continue to pose challenges. And we may see that in their interpersonal list, roommates, staff, family members, and other people that they closely interact with. Remember that if someone has not displayed a personality trait throughout their life, and we notice personality changes later in life, it is likely explained by a newer onset of cognitive impairment or other mental health condition like a depression, because again, personality disorders adapt or develop young. Placement in long-term care increases the stress, and coordinating care is critical to avoid the confusion and conflict older adults. So older adults also found to likely have a triple diagnosis of personality disorder, alcohol dependence, and depression in that population, which
Falling asleep.
yeah. So we talked a little bit earlier about why it doesn't really matter if you have a diagnosis. And that's why it's good news, but it's there's no cure, there's no treatment, there's no medication for a personality disorder. We're not in the Matrix where we take the red pill or the blue pill. Like we literally, this is what we got. So our personality is a personality. The only thing that we can do to manage or change coping strategies or personalities is through real serious work through therapy, and that's cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy. There's no easy cookie cutter way around it. We either learn the strategies or we don't. And that, think about the population that we support. I would like to, yeah. So the treatment for personality disorders is really about behaviors, like management. That's all we got.
And if they even accept,
That's a beautiful thing to put there.
Yeah.
We could say, hey, we found this great news. For what? I don't need therapy. And even if they did agree to go, they usually need the therapist. They have terrible relationships.
difficult to treat a person doesn't even think they have an issue. So why would you want any tips to fix issues we don't have?
100%. Yeah. So it's really, yeah, it's challenging. So when we consider what we can do, we can treat certain symptoms that come along particular personality disorder. So like, for example, we can treat impulsivity in borderline personality disorder. They have medications for like impulsivity, like in terms of anxieties and impulsive behaviors. we can treat depression, right? But the actual personality, so you don't really need a diagnosis. If it's behavioral management anyway, you can do that with or without. So that's kind of often what we end up doing. It's looking at what type of behavioral management you do. Antipsychotics can be used in cases of delusions or distorted thinking. So sometimes it's a typo, as you can see, they have a lot of delusional thinking. I feel like even in the narcissistic, there's some delusional things in there as well, and the histrionic. So depending on how severe the delusions are, if it's causing harm, we can do the D's, right? The 7 D's that we talked about. To see if it's worth using an antipsychotic, but psychotherapy is effective. And that therapy is directed towards management of the disorder, so education of illness, support, social skills training, and looking at targeting maladaptive coping strategies and replacing it with adaptive coping strategies. DBT can help to control intense emotions and reduce self-destructive behavior and improve relationships. And many people with personality disorders lead normal, fulfilling lives when they stick to treatment plans, and also looking at if you can develop some insight, right? So like they don't intrinsically have the insight, but if people start to point out patterns of behavior, people can develop, right? Like it's like anybody else, you can learn things. So if we can develop insight, then people might, like if somebody were to keep coming to me and say stuff, bunch of personality. I feel like eventually I'd be like, all right, yeah. I feel like I'd be more actually willing now because I've done a lot of this work here. I'd be like, that's possible because I've diagnosed myself with every single one at some point.
The empathy part is so hard, and even once learned, it can be like performative empathy. But if you haven't experienced how, like, yeah.
I try always because it is about empathy building because again, if you are going to be working with somebody through utilizing behavior management versus like a pill,
Yeah.
you have to believe in what's there, right? Like if I believe that someone's just an asshole, I'm way less likely to be supporting them meaningfully, right? If I don't believe that they're sick, if I don't believe that there's a pathology there, and I gotta be honest, even as a nurse, that's 100% true. I love working on this dementia floor. I would get punched like almost every day, but I loved it because I didn't care that I got punched. I was like, it's fine. Meanwhile, I would go to like a cognitive floor and someone would say like something rude or off-putting, and I was like, oh, yeah, right? Because they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I have way more tolerance when I believe that there's pathology. So I feel like mental health, I have a pretty big heart for living with a mental health, but I mean, personality disorders are tough because it seems so targeted.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very targeted behavior because you are the chosen one that they're going to use to manage and cope.
And it's so sadistic. It's like, are you enjoying hurting me? Like,
Just remember who the person's getting spot on the phone. They don't even realize.
I know, and I want them to realize how much that affects my day being all wet as a dog.
And they won't.
They won't.
So
You try to frame it in so many different ways, and it's still, yeah, I work in the community, so
Yeah. it's hard.
it's so,
It's
so.
it's a similar kind of lesson that I have to teach people or explain to people when we're looking at dementia behaviors. And everybody knows a resident at mealtime that wants their meal first. Everybody knows somebody who's like, I want my dinner first. And when that happens, our first immediate thing is to say, well, I'm giving it to them last. Because we want to teach them some sort of moral, like lesson, right? There's other people around. You're not the only one, because that's the way we are. We want to teach, it's almost like a child. We want to teach that, no, that's not how it works. What we have to get over is that with dementia, that part of the brain is existing. Right? They don't understand this idea of social like etiquette.
Yeah.
Because their brain is dying. So I'm not teaching anybody a lesson by giving it to them last. All I'm doing is putting myself through hell. Because now the person is gonna keep screaming and probably cause more behaviors because I can't get over my moral compass of just giving them the damn plate first. And that's what we actually have to do. We have to just give the damn plate first. Because they're never gonna learn our lesson that the 26 other people are. They don't have that ability anymore. It's the same with people who don't have any personality disorder. They don't know how else to cope. You're their means of coping. That's their survival. So until they learn the strategies, which in this age, good luck, we have to kind of find other ways of putting things in. Yeah.
An interesting thought because I did a lot of research into narcissistic personality and use those words, gaslighting and triggered and all of these things so colloquially now.
I know.
That they've watered down meaning for actual conditions. But the fascinating thing that this psychologist had brought forward is that not a singular person who is a diagnosed narcissist has ever been cured. They've done better if they actually have a lot of they care about people in their lives and they want to keep things copacetic.
Yep.
But there's no such thing as curing a narcissistic personality. And so what's interesting about this is the concept of teaching, especially at that age, and especially when you're thinking of comorbid, like cognitive impairment or 100% like with dementia. You're not teaching anybody anything, and I think that acceptance of that reality is actually a bit liberating, right?
Yeah.
Is this
You're
Dr.
not-
Ramey?
I'm sorry.
Dr. Ramey's
I
or?
don't remember.
Oh, okay,
It might be.
but it's the path of least resistance is that that's it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing we have to recognize too, even in our work with those who are living in long-term care, we're not gonna cure them, right? All we can do is set up boundaries to create successes or progress, not perfection, right? And so that's what we're gonna kind of look at is like supportive interventions, exercise, restorative, all of those exercise. Okay, obviously avoiding use of alcohol and drugs, that usually helps out people. Education about personality disorders, so if you can again create some of that insight, which is possible, people can build insight. Supportive talk therapy and psychotherapy, allowing the person to participate in their own care and care planning by giving back some of that control. But the real big kicker. So maximizing control is what we talked about. Consistent boundary and limit setting is the one that we're really going to get to. Looking at clear communication, ensuring consistent approach from all team members, environmental modification, and team support, including leadership. So when we consider the boundary setting, that's stuff we're really going to get into. When we consider the behaviors of personality disorder, they are increased based on stress, right? So what causes stress is unpredictability. So what do we do to remove unpredictability? We make things extremely predictable. How is that done? Creating boundaries and literally scheduling everything. So that's what we talk about in terms of managing behaviors and setting boundaries, is literally saying every day you will have breakfast. Would you like it between 8 and 9 or 9 and 10? And they say 8 and 9. Between 8 and 9. Why am I not saying you'll have it at 8:15? Can't meet that expectation and it goes against it and start from scratch. You have to build something that you can work with, because if you go out of line or you miss one, they'll take it all the way to the ground and you got to start again. So you do things that you can reasonably do. So even if it's 8 to 8:30 or 8:30 to 9, half an hour window, that's what you can work with. Then every day between 8 and 8:30, their breakfast has to be there. Now, if they're ringing the bell at 7:58, you got to break and I say, look at the contract, we'll be here between 8 and 8:30.
That sparkle with behavioral content.
Always going back to what it says. Never go without it. And why is this so damn hard? Because we have staff who come from agency, we have staff who are in dietary, we have staff who work in 3 different community agencies that go to one, and nobody knows because it doesn't get passed along, or one person gets missed, and then I'm telling you, if they find a way around it, it will burn it to the ground, and you have to start from scratch. It is one of the hardest things to do in healthcare, is to keep a behavioral strategic plan that everybody follows. Because we get so many different hands in the kitchen, or the notes doesn't get passed along to the right person.
Yeah.
And also sometimes we have the people who may not have the personality for it. What do I mean by that? You cannot send a lamb. You have exactly. You need a lion. You need somebody who's gonna be able to say, nope, I'll be back between 8 and 8:30. Thank you. Bye. You can't have it. You can't have the lamp. You have to have somebody who's got a bit backbone, who's able to be a bit stern. We're not yelling at or swearing at or being rude to. We're just being very matter of fact, keeping the boundary and walking away. Because you don't want to give them an in, and you don't want to have an option for them to manipulate. Because they will. That's their coping strategy. So what you will see when you first start a behavioral care plan is you'll see an increase in behavior because we're taking away control. But then as it becomes predictable, start to see the behavior drop because it's predictable. There's every day the same thing's happening. The stress is being depleted. So at first you actually see a spike in behavior. Everybody's like, this isn't working, it's getting worse. It's a gap, it's still under control. But now you're going to start to see the drop because it becomes predictable. And people start to realize that they don't stress because they know exactly what's going to happen. And that reduces the behavior. So there is a package that actually exists on Brain Exchange. It is a personality disorders package. It is brilliant. That's what this is from as well. I will. And then we can give it to you guys.
Yeah.
It's the it's a full breakdown of make it.
I'll do that,
Okay, so in terms of Mrs. E, I want to bring it back. And just very quickly, if you think about Mrs. B, what personality disorder or urges do you believe she would have? And what do you think would be a good strategy for Mrs. B? Yeah,
She needs a lot of boundary setting.
a lot of boundary setting, absolutely.
So. Here, we're going to do this first, and then we can talk about. Concerns that you have. I have exactly until this time. We need to get this done. We'll get this done, and then we'll talk about maybe.
Beautiful, love it. And which one do you think she has? Or many?
She's one of the shops around the clusters, I think.
Okay, shop around. I like it. Anyone else? Paranoid? Okay. So someone took paranoid personality disorder? Cluster A,
At least that's one of the cluster B too.
some of the cluster B. Anything in particular that points out or?
Yeah, the histrionic one is.
Histrionic?
Narcissistic.
Okay,
He's wrong.
I'm right. Like it. Okay, so it's attention. So what are some other strategies that we do? So we have boundary setting, ensuring that we're all using the same approach. Some that we learn in GPA. Yeah, so we want to make it like one of them together. You can- let's say that.
Other than the default. But, type of, a space where you things are.
Absolutely, we can calendar, what's happening at this time, she knows everything that's going on. Give her options to choose from, remembering the control and taking away the unpredictability. Giving as much control as possible so that they feel like they are stressed by not having control, but also taking away the unpredictability of them. Any other guesses about what Mrs. B's personality disorder is, or any other suggestions on what we might work with? Strategy.
Like the wrong.
Yeah.
Refusing off here, like, it reminds me of a child, you know, when they don't get their way, I'm not going to that, I'm not going to that. Yeah. Absolutely.
Does she have?
One thing, something.
Yes, thank you. So making sure that it's communicated between all staff of what we need to be doing with her, yeah. Yeah, this is hard.
That's very different. That's the one.
100%. Absolutely. Person-centered approach, knowing a bit behind maybe what costs her to have a personality disorder. Maybe we can't fix it, but maybe we can find out what's there, right? And we can figure out what a stressor is for her. Because if we know what stress is or cause unpredictability, we can control it better.
Right, so understanding their triggers, and it could be, the tone, a name, like, I'm thinking of my own, experience, but being called by their first name, they actually prefer their middle, and there is a history of what being bullied.
Yeah,
by their
absolutely.
first name.
Or deadly, right? Like other things too, if it's related to sexual trauma, related to gender identity. If someone's being dead named, that can cause a lot too. So, does everybody know what dead name means?
No.
So dead name basically means if someone transitions gender,
Oh,
dead name. So they dead name their gender name.
Okay.
So like if I was a male and my name was Adam, and then I transitioned into Sasha,
Yeah.
my dead name, yeah, back then, and if anybody calls me that, they're dead name. And it creates trauma because that's not that anymore.
We try our best to medical records accurate, but yeah.
And if you could think about also having somebody who maybe had some gender, or gender just issues in terms of growing up and maybe growing up in a family that was more gender affirming, boys are boys and girls are girls, that can create trauma, right? For a child who maybe doesn't identify with the gender that they are, the body they're in or whatever it might be, but that could also be something we see. Yeah.
And sometimes it's good for the person here that
100%.
sometimes persons you have to find out what they do. So we have to understand that if you can get you get more from them than trying to walk away from them.
So that's what we talk about in terms of validation versus reality orientation. So if somebody is experiencing a reality other than ours, that tends to be pretty happy for them or tends to be their, like in dementia, we always say validation is the way to go because they're not able to join our reality, right? Our reality isn't real to them, it's scary to them. Whereas if we're talking about somebody who's in psychosis, somebody who's experiencing negative experience of their reality, we reality orient because we want to take them away from the negative experience if we can.
I refer to as therapeutic lying. With the GP approach that, you know, if they truly believe their husband is still alive and comes down, but they, you know, yeah.
Yep. So in terms of therapeutic lines, so there is different ways to do that. So oftentimes, like some people might say, "Where is my mom?"
Yeah.
And we might say, "Oh, they're going grocery shopping."
Yeah.
Right. They're going to be vaccinated.
Yeah.
We actually say, don't do that.
Oh, so, no one listens to me.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
What we say is, you want to find the emotion behind it. Do you ever have that objection?
Yeah.
So it's not about telling that, no, don't tell the truth. For dementia. For dementia. We'll talk about psychosis in just a second, but for dementia, what we do is try to find the feeling behind where it's coming from. So for example, if somebody says, where's my mom? We're not going to say, oh, your mom's coming. And we're not going to say, well, your mom's dead. Right? What we're going to say is, it sounds like you're missing your mom. Can you tell me a bit more about it? And then we validate the emotion that's behind what they're asking for. And the reason why is because of something called procedural memory. So if you know that after somebody becomes or has cognitive impairment, eventually, even though they live in long-term care and they just moved in after their dementia experience, they can eventually find the dining, right? It's through procedural memory. So they do something enough, it actually goes into their procedural memory, they know how to find it. There's some studies to suggest that when people keep saying or using the same line over, that your mom's coming,
Yeah.
but it never happens, they remember it, but they associate it with a negative feeling. So now they don't trust you, but they might not know why. Yeah. So we are trying now to find the meaning behind. So if I miss my mom, what might I be feeling? Well, loneliness. Maybe it's close to dinner. I'm hungry. Mom, you should have dinner going on. I don't know. Right? But so we look at that and say, oh, it sounds like you miss your mom. Can you tell me more about it? So then they might say, well, usually mom's already got dinner going on here at this time. Right? And then that actually tells us a little bit more about what they're actually feeling. The need behind it is actually hungry. So we can feed and fix the need and then hopefully subside the need.
What approach is this?
So that is so it's validation, it's successful verbal validation. Yeah. So when we consider, no problem, we consider psychosis now, if somebody's like, the people are coming to kill me, right? We're not gonna go, oh yeah, people are coming to kill me. That's like, we're not gonna validate that. We're not going to say, no, no one's coming to kill you, because now you're with people trying to kill them. They believe that you're, oops. We look and we say, that sounds really scary. I would be really scared too. I haven't seen anybody, but where would you feel most safe? How can I help you? So you almost ask people how you can help within their delusion, especially if they're feeling like they're at risk.
And say it's a situation where, like, where you can validate their hallucination, if they see, a growth on the floor, a bump on the floor, and then I pretended to jump into the thing.
Yeah.
That's like they're okay, because then they're like, oh, do you think I should have done that? Because then they're like, oh, okay, thank you so much, I feel much better.
Yeah. So often I would say, would it help if I smush them?
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Because so I'll tell you the funniest story. This is Maria McMahon's experience. So she had somebody in their care that believed there was a man sitting on her head. That was the experience. The man was sitting on her head. And my colleague at the time was like, what? She's like, oh, I don't see anybody on your head, but what could we do to help you? She's like, well, maybe if I run, he'll fall off. So then they're like, okay. So they ran together. And she's like, oh, he fell off. So the lady actually has the answer. Because what the hell are we gonna do with a man sitting on her head? Like, what am I gonna do? But I don't know. So often if you put it back to them, like, how can I help you? What could we do to help? They might have an answer that feeds their own solution. So exactly. So you could say, would it help if I squish? Right? And if she says, yeah, then oh, I got them all. So we could, based on their direction, we could kind of feed it to them. All right, so long module. This is actually was a real case. She actually had borderline personality disorder. Yeah, but the whole point that we use this for is it doesn't matter. All the things that you guys mentioned are good for anybody who's living with personality disorder. It's all about boundary setting and behavioral modification and behavior management. It doesn't matter if she had all 3 or all 10, all 3 clusters or all 10 personality disorders. We're going to go with the same type of behavior management. All right. All right, I know that was a long one, so we'll take a 10-minute stretch. Everybody okay with that? And then we're gonna get into the only one module left. So why don't we come back at 3 o'clock? And I will write down this package for you.
Nó có tiền lắm gì. Cái chuyện có thể ăn. Được ăn. Miễn cho nó có cái chữ đi ra nhưng nó sẽ xài trên đó. Đi. Khoảng bao lâu? Thì em nghĩ tới con 10 phút. Không cũng được, em làm sẵn rồi, cái ngồi chụp hình gửi qua cái em bấm.
We just put on the screen here that personality disorders package that I talked to you guys about. It's on Brain Exchange. You can always just look up on Google. First, but I just did brain exchange personality disorders, and this pops up. But I feel I'd like to do it together. I think jumping in the way and they actually got the new in the town. Whenever I'm doing it, I love the topic anyway. Then they break down in one person kind of like at a and thing of jumping in and out.
Okay, thank you so much for confirming. Okay. Okay, thank you. Who's with this conflict? Okay, oh, well, there. Inspired by the first.
Oh, I was like, what?
Yes.
That's like, you know, like.
Yeah, they have stuff like that. Yeah.
I'm only asking for the, I was calling, wanted to send you like. 2 years. Yeah. And I thought when they're younger, it's like my, like I'm sure you're different.
No, no.
So I first day planned for the back. Like I don't want to. I don't want to be.
One of that.
Mental paralysis, that is growth.
Yeah. That's like,
Oh, sorry, Sasha, did you say three?
Yeah.
That's, yeah. A whole lot. Awesome.
Oh,
You really get somewhere. Okay, we'll start in 30 seconds.
oh, sorry.
Like,
yeah,
like, absolutely.
really. Oh,
Something.
yes, I remember. In this month, we had an issue.
Yeah, I know, every time I talk to them. And um, I live, I love, I laugh. All right, team, we're gonna get started. So now we're on to schizophrenia. When we start this, we're first going to go through some true or false questions, okay? So. There we go. Okay, true or false? Women are diagnosed twice as often as men with schizophrenia. False. Raise your hand if you think true. Okay, we have about 3, 4 people say true. Raise your hand if you think false. Okay, we have about 4 or 5 people saying false. So the answer is false. It occurs in both, slightly more common in men. Okay, true or false? The age of onset tends to be the teenage years and into the early 20s. Hands up for true. Okay, hands up for false. Okay, almost an even split. So the answer for this one is true. Most common age symptoms first appear in between teens and early 20s, but can appear mid to late life. Question. As many as 1 in 100 people may develop symptoms of schizophrenia. True? Raise your hands. There's only one person who thinks it's false. The rest of you? Majority of the rest of you? All right. So the answer for this one is the answer for this one is true. Delusional disorder is another condition you may encounter. In delusional disorder, the main symptom is the presence of either bizarre beliefs, such as the person's organs have been all removed and replaced with another person's, to the non-bizarre, such as the neighbors have a grow up next door. What separates a delusional disorder from a condition such as schizophrenia is we don't see the impairments in their level of functioning or the behaviors that accompany diagnoses such as schizophrenia or other mood-related disorders. We have one more up. Okay, last one. Schizophrenia likely develops as a result of biological and environmental factors. True, raise your hand. Okay, false. You mix them both there? On the front, or true or false? False, okay. So the answer is true. Okay, so we still don't know what causes schizophrenia, but like most other mental health conditions, researchers believe a combination of biological and environmental factors contribute. These factors are things such as genetics, imbalance of brain chemicals, structural differences in the brains of people living with schizophrenia, brain development factors, trauma, and cannabis use in early life. I remember when I was growing up and I was younger, and I was in my teens, I'm 30 now. I remember hearing, oh, cannabis causes schizophrenia. Cannabis causes schizophrenia. And I was like, I don't think it does. And I remember learning more about it. And it's just one of those predisposing factors. It's not to say there's not necessarily a direct correlation that like you smoke weed, you're gonna get schizophrenia. It's more so it could be if you're already predisposed to schizophrenia, you have a genetic trait, and maybe that you're more likely to get it earlier onset or quicker compared to later in life, or it may trigger that gene to become more prominent, for example, but it's not cause and effect related. So what is schizophrenia? It is a serious illness of the brain, and it's also a spectrum condition, schizophrenia spectrum disorder. There is currently no cure for schizophrenia, but treatment is an important part of helping to manage the symptoms. Psychosis is one of the significant impacts of schizophrenia, which causes a person to experience a loss of contact with reality, and it does not affect intelligence, but does impact other thinking functions, such as attention, memory, and the ability to plan. I know there's maybe with our older generations that we work with, sometimes there's a lot of stigma around, some of the more psychotic disorders, such as schizophrenia, thinking, oh, they're dangerous, oh, they're this, oh, they're that. But they're very conflict. They can function well in society when their symptoms, of course, are managed and treated. It just affects other aspects. So we're going to move on to reading about the DSM-5 criteria. So two or more of the following, each present for a significant portion of time during a 1 month period, or less is successfully treated. At least one of these must be delusions, hallucinations, or disorganized speech. So delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech. So frequent derailment or incoherence. Something you may also see with your aphasia. Grossly disorganized or catatonic behavior. Does everyone know what catatonic is? Raise your hand if you know. I'll bet raise your hand if you know. Okay, so it's kind of just like you remain in almost like a statue state. You just don't move, and it's not lack of motivation, lack of interest. It's not apathy in any way. I don't know if science kind of catatonia exactly, but I don't. I just know that it's kind of that state where you're not. Maybe you stay in bed, maybe you sit on the yeah, like how.
So it's actually where there's a disruption in the awareness of motor. So it's like the person has lost that connection between the brain and the motor function. So that can often result in less motor function because they don't have a connection. That makes sense?
So their brain is not able to tell their body to get out.
There's
I knew what catatonia was. I just never knew why.
So like frozen.
Yeah.
yeah.
So is it very Parkinson's?
No, so Parkinson's is a degenerative muscle illness. So like Parkinson's, the actual motor neurons are destroyed, whereas in, it's the actual, like, so between neurons you have neurotransmitters that send messages to each other. The messages that go between the two, the neurotransmitters that get sent almost send like a message like, you need to move your arm. It's not the death of the neurons, it's the transmitters that are the problem. Whereas with Parkinson's, it's actual deterioration of the motor neuron. Does that make sense?
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And, sorry.
Today too.
Okay.
Right.
So sorry, it took me a second to catch on what you were saying, then I heard my name and I was like, oh, I was totally doing something completely unrelated.
Other DSM-5 criteria, continuous signs of the disturbance persist for at least 6 months. They must include at least 1 month of symptoms or less if successfully treated that meet the above criteria. Example, active phase symptoms. They may include periods of prodromal or residual symptoms where the signs of the disturbance may be manifested only by negative symptoms or by 2 or more symptoms listed above present in the attenuated form. For a significant portion of time since the onset of the disturbance, level of functioning in one or more major areas such as work, interpersonal relations, or self-care is markedly below the level achieved prior to. Okay, so we are going to go into learn about the positive, negative, and cognitive symptoms of schizophrenia. So people living with schizophrenia may experience positive and negative signs and symptoms along with changes to their cognitive functioning. One way that I like to think of positive and negative is positive is things that add to the person's reality that weren't already there, weren't already present. So things like hallucinations, delusions, illusions. And then negative symptoms are things that take away from a person's reality. So things like apathy, for example, or catatonia, things that weren't there and reduce the person's reality. And then cognitive are the things that are like mood changes, suicidal thoughts or behaviors, sleep disturbances, etc. So we're going to go through them in the next few slides in more detail. The diagnostic criteria are the same for adults and children. And people with schizophrenia often have multiple issues and complex situations, including things such as physical health problems, substance misuse, or a history of traumatic events. So positive symptoms, as I said, are things that add to a person's reality. So like delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech. As a reminder, delusions are fixed false beliefs, not based in reality. That's also the difference in when we reviewed the 7 Ds, how it says at the end it's like fixed, or I forget the word for it, but we're going to review it shortly anyways, like fixed or partial. With a delusion, it is fixed. With a hallucination, it may be partial. Disorganized speech, thoughts, or behaviors as well. So, for example, they may jump from topic to topic, may jump words, or you may hear the term word salad as well, where it doesn't make sense. Think of it as somebody with aphasia, where you're talking to them and it's not a structured, put together sentence that you can make sense. Negative symptoms, like I said, reduced functioning or lost functioning, so restricted emotional and facial expression, like apathy, restricted speech and verbal fluency, difficulty generating ideas or thoughts, reduced ability to begin tasks, and reduced socialization and motivation. The negative symptoms are things we typically have and do, but are reduced or lost in symptoms, like facial expressions and the amount we talk. You may see people who don't have much emotion to situations that typically would involve emotion, like they're not really sad, they're not really happy, they're just kind of very neutral when talking to. Go ahead, you had something to say? Okay. Then, there we go. Then the cognitive symptoms. So, cognitive changes are often most associated with conditions like dementia, but conditions like schizophrenia also impact the way the brain thinks. thinking functions can be affected, such as ability to concentrate and remember, reasoning, and insight. As we learned in a few previous slides, it's not that they are not able to function or that they're less intelligent, but things like planning, concentrating, remembering, reason, and insight are impacted, which of course can, like the DSM-5 criteria stated, impact overall well-being and function by these. You may also notice some mood changes. People living with schizophrenia may have intense experiences of their mood, or conversely, may have flat affect. Another mood disturbance may be depression, and we must be mindful of the possibility of the person having thoughts of suicide. Some people may try to self-medicate to cope with their distress of the symptoms, so substance misuse may be an issue. Sleep can also be affected. All right, we're going to go through the 7 Ds again because it is relevant in this section as well. As we do see, people with schizophrenia experience delusions and hallucinations, and so it is our job to kind of go through the 7 Ds checklist to see, is this something that involves immediate, that needs or requires immediate intervention? Is this something I should be concerned about? Is this something I have to do something about now, or can kind of like create a safer now, safer later plan? It is designed to help the team explore the nature of psychosis and how to best proceed to support the person. At times, more intrusive measures may be warranted, such as hospitalization and the use of antipsychotic meds, but in other circumstances, it may be in the best interest of the person to not force treatment on. The tool helps to have those conversations and get the information the team may need to make these decisions. So we'll talk about the 7 Ds. We'll just do a little review. I'm going to give you a short case summary here on Barbara, and then we will go through the 7 Ds to see which of them she is experiencing. I think you might have Barbara's case study in the book, but if you don't, I'm going to read it in. Barbara is a 71-year-old resident who previously experienced homelessness and has now been living in long-term care for 6 months. Barbara is diagnosed with schizophrenia and osteoporosis. Since her move to long-term care, the team members have been constantly challenged with providing Barbara with a shower or changing her clothes. Barbara often refuses to allow team members to support her and expresses paranoia about her intentions. She often questions team members, saying, "Why are you here?" and can be heard saying, "You are harassing me," or "I know what you want me to do. I know what you want to do to me." Barbara can be heard calling out for help loudly, especially when team members approach her. So we're going to go through the 7 Ds, and I want you to tell me, based on Barbara's case, which of the 7 Ds you think she has or doesn't have. So do we think that her situation is dangerous? You can just shout it out, yes or no. No, that's correct. Do we think that her situation is distressing? That's correct. Do we think that her situation is disturbing? Yes. Do we think that there is direct action? Yes, that is correct. She is still refusing care. Do we think it is jeopardizing her independence? The answer is no. There's nothing she can't do for herself because of this, so that's being impaired, like she's in restraints, for example, or she wanting to do something, but she can't. Do we think it is distant or present? Is this something that's happening now, or is this something that's happened in the past? Present, correct. And what about definite? Is this a fixed belief, like a delusion? Or is this, does she have some insight that this may be real or not? It's definite. Yes, it's definite, it's fixed, correct. So now that we've explored the risks using the 7 Ds tool, what we're going to do is we're going to use Barbara's story to think about how we could respond to her in the moment. We'll be formulating a response to Barbara, who is experiencing a delusion. So what we are going to do.
Because like, you don't even have tables, kind of largely get up discussion. You kind of makes it a little bit difficult with the setup.
Oh, Barbara's case is that, yeah,
Oh, I don't know if it's in this PowerPoint.
It's not, this, this one.
Yeah, no, it's not book either.
It's not in your books?
No.
You don't have this one, responding to delusions? It's like red, green, and blue.
I don't think so, we got it.
Okay.
We had the treatment.
The next one is treatment.
Oh, yeah. We don't have it all.
Here for it.
So, like,
We do it.
Yeah.
Work, and then we'll
All right, never mind, Barb. We're not dealing with her.
go. Barbara. She was happy with her parents and happiness.
She's actually so unhappy she left and just turned to stuff.
Mention that because I think that the amount of books that we had from the old printing, I think we're still using, and so we're not moving to the next one until after. Sorry, guys.
Okay, well, we're gonna move on to treatments. No worries. I was like, very good sport.
Barbara the dog.
Actually, not. So. You know what? Give me. All right. So recovery level fitness for everyone. Of course, with all these mental health concerns within investigators, always want to think one person, one plan. It can't be the same type of treatment for every person because, like with, for example, schizophrenia, a multitude of ways that people can be diagnosed with schizophrenia. It's not necessarily one linear path to schizophrenia. The main treatment, though, is antipsychotic medications. Why do we think the main treatment is antipsychotic medications? Because it is a say it. You got no, you were there. Disorder, exactly. Disorder because it is a psychotic disorder, so it can be therefore treated with antipsychotics because it has symptoms of that, right? So we often attempt to reduce the use of antipsychotic medication. I know a lot of long-term care homes are on an antipsychotic reduction program. I know many of them are. So we, as the name implies, though, these were designed to reduce psychotic symptoms. So for the use of schizophrenia, for example, or delusional disorder, for example, antipsychotics are the appropriate use. So it wouldn't necessarily be flagged in your RI or your MAR as inappropriate use and signaled to reduce these because it is psychotic an appropriate use. However, antipsychotics are often used in combination with other medications to address different symptoms, such as depression, or to manage side effects of antipsychotics. As we know with antipsychotics, they come with many, many side effects, like tardive dyskinesia, for example. You may see people who have tremors, or you may see people who have, like, maybe they might be drooling as well. There's many side effects, so sometimes they need additional medication to also help with those too. It is thought that there's a chemical that's overactive in the brain of people living with schizophrenia. It seems to help lessen the experience of positive symptoms like delusions and hallucinations. Supportive therapy is also an important part of recovery as it helps individuals develop coping strategies. Peer support is also a recognized form of support. I don't know if they still have it, but there was also a first episode psychosis clinic based out of from CAMH on, I think, St. Clair Avenue West. I remember I did a walking group with them many years ago. I volunteered there. And it's nice. It was a lot of young people. So it was probably who were 20 in their 20s, early teens at the time. And it was very nice to have that. Then it was that shared, experience, people on the walk you talk to and talk about people. I was volunteering. I was part of the first episode psychosis group, but just hearing people's stories and that shared common ground and being able to have that group therapy aspect is nice again. Not alone.
What chemicals do they?
It said, I think,
Was this right here?
Yeah.
No.
yeah, it didn't specify, oh, okay, no, yes. Antipsychotics work by reducing the brain's chemical dopamine, and it is thought that this chemical is overactive in the brain of people living with schizophrenia. That was kind of a, that was also concept. Okay, so ways to support. So we can help with relationships, right? Really trusting therapeutic relationships, social supports, check-ins. There is this app for independence. And I do want to tell you about that. It is an evidence-based peer-to-peer digital therapeutic mobile app with a care coordination portal that supports people living with schizophrenia and other psychoses, and was developed through the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. It helps the person to have an organized living space with a predictable routine and environment. And as we discussed earlier, after eating well and remaining active are known to be good for our brain health. So this is good to encourage with the people, like the use of it with the people that you support. What do you think are some ways we can build rapport with people? How do we build, maintain, establish a therapeutic relationship with our residents? Pardon? Trust?
Even big person.
Yep, yeah, no problem, go ahead. Building trust, yeah. How do we build trust? Listening, active listening, yeah, what else? Yeah, go ahead.
I think allowing them to define those simple foods. We were saying earlier about asking how they feel about something, so that it gives them the autonomy and also the authority to be able to say how they're feeling without being told.
Exactly. I like that. I like that you emphasize without being told. I feel like sometimes in healthcare, you know, we want to define something. Oh, this, you know, like we label. Labels are for jars, not for people, right? We label people, and this is, you know, put them into this box based on what we think a diagnosis is supposed to be, or how we think someone should act based on this, or this, right? But giving them that space to kind of define it themselves and express it themselves is definitely very helpful. Some other suggestions, just to say hello to everyone, exchange pleasantries, have conversation. So basically, meaningful engagement outside of your clinical practice. So oftentimes, I know we have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 residents per one PSW, per one nurse, per one case manager, BSOT, individual, you know, one person assigned to many, many people. I get that can be overwhelming, right? I've been there, done that. I've been in the BSL lead role, one person, 20 residents on my caseload. But having those therapeutic, meaningful relationships and that meaningful engagement and focusing on social connection rather than the clinical piece can be very integral. If you're always going there, hi, can I check your blood pressure? Can I poke your finger to get your blood sugar read? Can I, you know, change your briefs, take you in for a shower, this, that, and the other thing. There's no time to build a therapeutic relationship. They're just seeing you as the person here to do something, right? That maybe makes them uncomfortable. What were you gonna say?
No, with the focus on motivation.
Yes. Exactly, right? Come in, hey, how's your day going? I brought you an extra cookie. You wanna go outside for a walk? I have a little bit of time right now. You wanna come sit outside with me for a little bit? Like, just even things like that. It changes, it really, really does change the relationship you have with your residents. And the reason we also take these trainings to this GPA pieces, you first, etc., is because your home also wants to give you that. I know sometimes it's like, I don't have time, I have 50 other tasks. Your home is trying to show you, hey, go to this course. We want to support you and give you that time to do these interventions, right? To show you the impact and the support. And there's many studies, many research out there, which is why we do courses like this, to show you that the power of the therapeutic relationship, right? Bedside manner, you learn about that, I'm sure, in nursing. When you do your rotations, your clinicals, OT, if you're into PT, PSW work, really any field, they talk about bedside manner, right? It's important. It makes, yeah, go ahead, sorry. I was too into it.
We do have that. Yeah. We have, a facility, we have a floor, and papers where that staff the maximum height residents are four.
Is that your PSU?
It's the dimension. So you don't have a lot you don't have a lot of residents on that floor. Each PSW I think has four. It's a long term, it's on the risk, yeah, the risk. Yes. And
What?
you can, watch movies,
There's a lot of homes too that are adopting things like the butterfly model, the Indian model of care, the 5-star model of care. There's a lot of homes that are trying to implement these. Tech ICT, I know a few of you here are implementing that as well. And it's these strategies that to help better sustain the non-farm approach. Anyways, we're getting off topic. Predictable environment. So keep to routines, establish systems for reminders, and encourage an organized living space. Again, with predictability, reduces that anxiety, the uncertainty, and also you can consider then things like environmental triggers that could trigger those delusions or those hallucinations. Looking ways to make it more sustainable and more suitable, even through things like app for independence to promote recovery and promote, as we discussed, the well state as well with your residents too. Of course, physical activity and healthy diet are known to be good for the brain as well. Physical activity, like we discussed earlier, can look different depending on the person that you're working with. It's not always go to the gym, lift weights, run a marathon, or do high rocks training. It could just be, let's get up and let's do 2 laps around the unit and then go sit down. Chances are with a lot of your residents, that might just tire them out. Literally maybe walking once around the floor, back and forth down the hallway. If they're able, like depending on if you're in community or something, up and down the stairs, if they're able. Sometimes tires them out just doing that, right? So these are things that we want to consider with our residents. We're now going to move on to a communication activity. Great. So we're not going to go into breakout rooms. We're going to do this in a large group discussion. People living with psychosis can feel paranoid and suspicious of others and their motives. Yet, if they have a relationship with you and feel safe with you, you are more likely to be able to connect with them and support them during an episode when they may feel mistrustful of others. There are actions all staff can take to help people build their relationships. And as a final activity of our day together, we're going to have a communication skills exercise. The intention of this exercise is to be mindful about how we verbalize our support and actively practice how we might build a relationship and connection. This is important with any person you are supporting, but we are highlighting here to remind us of the importance of our work and support people living with serious mental health conditions. So you won't be broken out into groups. Or maybe I can kind of split you in the middle somehow. May not be even. There's 5, 10, 15 people. So we can do, that's 4, 5. Okay, so from here over, you're going to be a group, I'd say moving closer together. And then you're going to wait, 3, 4. So 4, 5, you're going to be a group here, this triangle. Okay. Yeah, no problem. You might have dropped something. Okay. No problem. And then this. This is 4, 5. Did I? Yes, okay, so sorry, I did this wrong. Your group is fine, that side, group 1. You'll be here, okay? And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you'll be here, that will be your group. So group number 1. Pardon? That's okay, I'll explain it when she comes back, or you can explain it to her too, that's fine. So
Group number one, what I want you to do is I want you to think of some supportive communication strategies for when you want to be encouraging to your residents. Okay, so what could you say to them when you want to be encouraging? So I would encourage you to move over more so then you're all together working together. So think of 3 to 4 statements, what you could say to your residents to be encouraging. Okay. This group here, what I want you to focus on is being non-judgmental and accepting. So 3 to 4 statements you would say to your residents, your patients, your clients, that are non-judgmental and accepting. It is.
You walk down the hall.
You are going to
The can do, highlighting actual evidence of them in practice. Yeah, copying them and into doing something.
Okay, so I'll give you about 5 minutes and then we'll come back and we'll see what everybody.
Yeah, just positive reinforcement, active listening, and, just being that encouragement, using supportive and demeanor and nonverbal communication. I want to be specific, want to be specific, specific examples. Smiling, making eye contact. So avoiding talking about your caseload or how busy you are, or right, making making anything that could make somebody feel rushed or like they're a nuisance or that they're, using somebody's name. I hate. I'm an OT, when nurses at times will refer to patients by their room numbers. Um, It's highly disrespectful. Yeah. I think also just learning about people's personhood. So like if there's any that are posted, oh, that's from your granddaughter, Cecilia. And that's so nice. I feel like she came to visit. Isn't she growing up so fast? And what is she getting up to? So really just connecting to their personhood and things that are meaningful for them. I think that's solid. All right, we're good. We're good. We did it. And then it's a
Chat away. I give support to medicine. Readers left. Even think of 2 to 3 things. What sentences would you say to your residents? Be encouraging, to be non-judgmental, to focus on their skills and abilities. We have some in the course. What would you say? 30 seconds, and now 3 minutes moves on by. Where's the top? I'm Catherine. Still a few minutes.
Oh, it's just for the so 1 minute.
Okay, 1 minute, sorry. My guessing time. You know, this time. Okay, we're gonna wrap up now. So. For the Be Encouraging group, I want to hear a few phrases that you came up with. How would you encourage your residents? What would you say? Wonderful, I'm excited. Let's hear. You could have one person present for me, that works great.
Part of that is focusing on what they can do already. Trying to actually do something different. Praising them, having dialogue, eye contact, smiling, touch,
Yes.
be professional, not always solely thinking about that first stuff. Connecting to their personhood.
Yep.
Learning about themselves, what brings them happy.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Amazing. That was all beautiful. That was really, really well said, especially focusing on like their abilities, that therapeutic touch, everything. Amazing. Good job. Good work. So for your team, did you have one more thing to say?
No, she's just saying that she was on that.
Oh, yes, I know, yes. Perfect. Okay, your group. Being non-judgmental and accepting.
So we will say like now,
That they're really-
oh, is that part too?
That's okay. Go with themselves. Yeah, go ahead. I even support.
You said that, you know, we will show support, by saying like, no, I can show you what we want. And I can help you to clean up, get ready, because, you know, you take care of yourself if you're ready. We can work together if you want my help. Not rushing them while you look here.
Good job.
And say
You got this. You got this.
saying those give them the moment, like, you know, like.
I love that.
In the moment, it's like, okay, think of something.
Yeah. Away from them. Yeah. Good job. That's amazing. Good job, team. All of you so far. Amazing work. We'll clap for each other in a sec though. Good job. Great work. Go ahead. So yours was recognizing skills and abilities.
By what they do over the years. Also, what they do, what really showing what you want to do. And what they are. I think ask them like the teacher, you know, there's some skills that you know, like you praising them like the teacher, it builds up the person's self-esteem, and I think we push them people. So that's what came up with get people to put them to the point where they would want to do challenges.
doing a train the trainer course to become certified in coaching dementia ability, and I had to, with one of my long-term care homes, like oversee one of my colleagues facilitating, anyways, focusing on the remaining abilities, and one of the residents that I was working with, loved like crocheting and knitting, and actually ended up creating a little group of other staff members and residents, one of the residents who was part of the program too, to actually teach a few of the staff how to crochet and knit, and they now have a little group where they crochet and knit together, including staff. So it's really like it allows the residents to actually reminisce about the activities as well. So that's fantastic. So here are some of the examples that were given as well. So great work, you all literally put the nail on the head. Pat yourself on the back. Good job, all of you, every single one of you. Congratulate yourselves. Good to see it. Good job. All right. Woo! All right, we only have like 2 or 3 slides left, so we're at these are resources. You have those in your guidebook, and then we have our references. So wrap up and takeaways. You have some instructions here on the board. So in your book, you can write down 2 key strategies that you will put into practice with the people that you're caring for. And I would love to hear if anyone even, you can write them down at your own time, but if anyone would like to share out loud, I'd love to hear from a few of you before we go. Something you learned and something you're gonna put into practice when you leave today. If you have social anxiety, that is okay. I won't pick on you. That is, don't want to put it, go ahead. Yeah. Okay, and then personality disorders. Amazing, thank you. Thank you so much. That was a nice, well-rounded response. I think she was first, then go ahead. Yeah. Be mindful of people. Exactly. Beautiful. Very well said. Go ahead.
I learned that 1 in 100 people will develop schizophrenic symptoms.
Yeah.
And I could not believe that.
Yeah, that's a pretty big number. That is, that's a lot of people. Thank you.
My takeaway was, well, is that a lot of the disease, like especially personality disorders and such, you can't change it. You can't change how we are. So instead of trying to change, you just have to accept it and just work with it. And
Yeah.
don't take it personal.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, no, that's great. Great. Amazing. Anybody else have anything they want to share?
In theory,
Go ahead.
yeah, and for myself, was 17, and any of the first 3 to act.
Yes.
Right, or, yeah.
Yes. Amazing. Thank you. That's a good reminder about the first 3, plenty of the first 3 to really act. Go ahead.
So the 7 I learned, something new about that I didn't really know about the sensitive writing. And the thing that I also take away from this book is that not standards are treatable, and that is something that really and real right here to me, and I say because all along everything that
We're trying to cure, yeah.
but now that I'm learning it, I've learned that not all disorders are treatable by medication. And that's something that is a people.
So true. Some of the disorders you can resolve, like, you can resolve depending on, where you're at, the stage of it, the progression, where there is so many factors, but some of them, all you can do is manage the symptoms, right? And then you have to manage them with either straight pharmacological interventions or a mix of non-pharm and pharmacological, or sometimes solely just with non-pharm as well. It's really the person as always. Does anybody else want to share before we do our close? Not, well, I will start and I'll let Sasha finish. Thank you so much, everybody, for your attendance today. You were all so wonderful, so engaging, and it was nice to see some familiar faces too. And I look forward to seeing you soon. So thank you so much. It's wonderful just being here today. I appreciate all of your time.
Such a pleasure, guys. What a great day. Thank you for your patience with a lot of the information, also with your enthusiasm and your collaboration and contributions. That's what I was like. I was looking for a C word and it wasn't the one that first came. But yeah, so thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. If you guys ever need to reach out to your PRC, if you don't know who your PRC is, even if you work in the community, you do have a PRC. So just let us know and we can always connect you with that person. Otherwise, we give you back the gift of time. So enjoy it. Thank you. Also, we'll be emailing the certificate. We have your email, so it'll get emailed to you. So don't worry about it. Thank you. Bye.
Hello.
Nghe,
Bị lâu chưa?
nghe. Nói bị nãy ai biết đâu, có nhắn tin cho ba nè, nó kêu ba uống thuốc kia vô đi, ba nó xị thì khó chịu, mà nó vô nó kêu ba uống thuốc của bác sĩ cho đó, nói cho nữa đó, cái mình rồi uống kêu có tao gọi khẩu gì, tao hỏi ba sao rồi, ba nói giờ đỡ rồi, rồi ba nói với ngốc gì trước thôi, ba nói là tao đi thì chỉ thấy cái gì phía trước, nó mấy ngày nay tao thấy ba đi kia rồi, thì mà nghĩ mới cái đâu có nghiêng trước gì đâu, thì bởi vậy thì tao có hỏi cái đó lần sau, cái đó nó không có nói từ đây cho đến chiều, mà nếu mà không ổn thì nó chở đi, thì chở đi ha, tao nói gì tôi sẽ về, chở đi, trước đó tao đi làm về 2 giờ mới đi đúng không, nếu mà có đúng là triệu chứng đó thì chở đi, nhưng mà nó có cái chụp hình đây mà, thì chở vô nó chụp nữa, có không, cái chuyện đi nó không ổn rồi, giờ nó ngồi gọi có khoảng 1 giờ rưỡi, ông đi xe ra của ba á, rồi lúc đó tao chưa về thì có chỉ biết ngồi gọi một khi qua đập cái app gì đó kêu họ thôi lại tôi có ok ổn thì chắc là tôi chạy đi, thì ông nó chưa tới chắc khoảng nửa tiếng ông tới, giờ khi ba nằm yên ba ngồi với chị và ba đang ngồi nó coi tivi bình thường, ta coi camera thì vẫn coi nhát rồi có cái gì ta đỡ rồi, hồi nãy ba đi thì ba thấy hơi hơi chóng mặt nhưng mà chưa có chóng mặt rồi chưa có chóng mặt cái như lần trước,